Hey, Charger History. Today's essential question is, what was the social structure of ancient Egypt? Please skip one line and copy the essential question neatly in your notes. Pause your video to copy. Good. Do not draw your vertical line. Instead, I'm going to need you to draw something different in your notes today. But first, let's remember yesterday. Yesterday we learned about the importance of the Nile River. Do you remember when we said that Egypt was the gift of the Nile? What did that mean? So we know that the Nile kept people alive. Now let's find out how they lived. We'll start with their social structure. Remember that the social structure is the way people are organized by money and power. On your notes, draw a pyramid like this. For each level of the pyramid, you'll be writing the name of the social class, you'll draw a quick picture, and you'll give a short description. Please copy what you see on your screen. Alright, we will use a pyramid to illustrate social class because there are more people at the bottom. In fact, almost 80% of Egyptians would be found in the bottom two classes, and very few people at the top. This top pyramid, or top part of the pyramid, is actually only one person. This person is the pharaoh. Go ahead and copy this word, pharaoh. Draw a small, quick picture that looks kind of like this. And then we will copy these details about the pharaoh. While you copy, I'll be telling you about the pharaoh. Just pause your video if you need to write first and then listen. So if my talking is distracting you, just press pause and then you can listen to me tell you about the pharaoh. Okay, so the pharaoh was the king of Egypt. He had all the power and he owned all the land. He was the head of the military, he made all of the laws, and he was the most important religious leader. In addition to that, many Egyptians believed that the pharaoh was a god. That was how the pharaoh got his power, because people either believed that he was a god himself or that the gods had sent him to take charge. Even though the pharaoh was in charge, he had many government officials and priests who did the work of running the country for him. Also, pharaohs were usually men, but there were a few women pharaohs, and we will learn about some of them in our unit. So even though they were usually kings, there were sometimes queens. Pharaohs often had many wives, and generally the pharaoh's son became the king after the pharaoh died. The royal family lived in great luxury, with jewelry and clothes made from the finest linens. They lived in the grand palace, but they also had many other homes throughout Egypt. Alright, let's move on. Press pause if you need more time to copy these, and if you heard anything else interesting that you would like to add, you can add that to the bottom of the list. Our next social class are the people who advise the pharaoh. We have the vizier, senior officials, high priests, and nobles. Please copy that into your pyramid, and you may draw a quick picture if that will help you remember. Otherwise, you can skip the picture. So the government officials served as advisors to the pharaoh. They helped the pharaoh make his laws. They were in charge of collecting taxes from the Egyptian people, but their taxes were not collected in money, they were collected from the farmers in crops. Important officials were often in charge of different sections of the country or led sections of the army. Government officials had lives of luxury. They had many rooms in their homes. They had fine clothes and jewelry. They wore makeup. They often had parties with wine and fancy meat like ducks and sheep, and goats. They had really fancy lives. Especially priests and priestesses were very important to Egyptians. They were the religious advisors to the pharaohs. They performed ceremonies at temples, festivals, and funerals. They worked taking care of statues of gods. They also oversaw the whole process of making mummies, which we're going to learn about tomorrow. It was really important that they did that job because making a mummy was the only way that they believed that person could make it to the afterlife. Men and women could both be priests, and priests were allowed to have they were allowed to have marriages, they could have kids, and they generally had really nice houses. Go ahead and add any important details if you heard anything else, but again, if you just want to copy this, that's fine. Your next level is the scribes. Please write scribe and draw a little picture to help you remember that the scribes were the people who wrote. They were the official writers and record keepers. They were slightly in a lower class than the priests and government officials. They worked for the government still because they were the official government record keepers. They told the pharaoh about what was happening in the country. They kept records of the grain supply, taxes, and court cases. And they had to go to school for 12 years to learn more than 700 symbols in the Egyptian alphabet. Schools for scribes were very strict, and beatings for laziness or for not paying attention were very common. But once you got done with school, you were very well respected and you got paid pretty well. Next level, the skilled artisans and craftspeople. Artisan is one of your vocabulary words. It just means a person who works with their hands. So these people made tools, furniture, linen cloth, jewelry, art, and statues, anything else that needed to be made. Draw a little picture to show someone working with their hands. Pause if you need more time. All right, add anything else if you heard something interesting. And let's move on to our next level. Now we're getting into the lower classes, to people that did not have a great lifestyle. Everybody who's up here and above had enough money to live comfortably and had enough respect in society. The people below this, though, had pretty uncomfortable lives and spent a lot of time doing hard labor. These people are the peasant farmers and workers. These are the people who were at almost the bottom of the social pyramid, even though everybody in the city depended on them. They grew all the crops that supplied everyone with food. They farmed using a plow pulled by cows. And during the planting and harvesting seasons, they were working in the fields all day. During the summer season, when the Nile was flooded, they worked for the pharaoh by building monuments and pyramids. The peasants lived in simple brick homes with little furniture. They ate fish and bread, but they rarely ate fancy meat like the upper classes. They often worked for 9 days straight, and they rested on the 10th day. They had to pay their taxes to the government with crops, and they were beaten by the government officials if they were not able to pay. But even though their life was hard, they still were not at the bottom. Make sure you have these details copied. And let's move on to our last social class. These are the servants and slaves. Please copy servants and slaves and draw a small picture to remind you that these people worked hard without being paid. The servants and slaves most often worked as field hands, which means they helped the farmers in the fields, or as house servants, waiting on the pharaohs or waiting on other members of the noble classes. Of course, since they were slaves, they were not paid for their work, but they did have some rights. They could own land, they could marry, they could even employ their own servants. Slavery in Egypt did not mean total ownership. It meant that you just worked hard without being paid. It did not mean that your master would own you. Go ahead and add any details that you would like to here, but make sure that you at least have this copied. And if your notes are complete, then you're ready to go on to some practice. Please X out of this video and go back to your playlist to find your practice.